The rain fell hard that November evening in London. Cold drops hammered against the pavement outside Buckingham Palace. Inside the Grand Hall, something was wrong. Princess Anne stood at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Her hands trembled. Not from cold, from something else entirely. Behind her, the royal guard stood perfectly still. Rows of red uniforms, black bearskin hats. Eyes forward, never blinking, never moving. That was the rule, the protocol. For over 300 years, the Queen's Guard had followed one simple command: stand still, no matter what. But tonight, one of them was about to break that rule. His name was James McAllister, 28 years old, 6 feet tall. A soldier who had served in Afghanistan, a man who had seen things most people never would. He had trained for months to become part of the Guard. It was an honor, duty, a privilege, and he was about to throw it all away. The crowd outside, the palace gates grew larger. Tourists, photographers, protesters, they had come for the announcement. Princess Anne was supposed to speak tonight. A public statement about the recent scandal that had shaken the royal family. Accusations, lies, headlines, cut deeper than any blade. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Inside, the princess turned from the window. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She had been crying. No one was supposed to see that. Royals don't cry in public. Royals don't show weakness. That was another rule. But James saw it. He stood just 15 feet away at his post near the eastern corridor. His rifle at his side, his face blank, his body rigid, but his eyes flickered toward her for just a second. That's when he noticed something else. Her hand moved to her chest. A slight movement. Most people wouldn't catch it, but James had been trained to see everything. To notice the smallest detail. A threat. A danger. A problem. She was struggling to breathe. The princess took a step forward, then stopped. Her other hand reached for the wall. She was trying to steady herself, trying to appear calm, but her body was betraying her. James's heart began to race. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't part of the plan. Something was very wrong. The other guards didn't move. They didn't see what he saw. Or maybe they saw it and chose to ignore it. That was protocol too. Unless there was a direct threat, a guard does not move, does not speak, does not interfere. But James knew the truth in that moment. Sometimes protocol isn't enough. Princess Anne took another step. This time her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself, but barely. Her breathing came faster now, shallow, panicked. James made a decision. He stepped forward. The sound of his boot on the marble floor echoed through the hall like thunder. Every head turned. Every guard's eyes widened behind their stoic masks. The staff members gasped. A royal guard had moved without permission, without orders, without cause that anyone else could see. James walked directly toward Princess Anne, his face still calm, his movements steady, but inside, everything was screaming at him to stop. His career, his reputation, his entire future, all of it was on the line. But he kept walking because he saw something. One else did, and what he was about to whisper to her would change everything. Asterisk, asterisk, the princess looked up as James approached. Confusion flashed across her face. Then fear. Not fear of him. Fear of what this meant. A guard doesn't just walk up to royalty. Not without being summoned. Not without permission from 3 different officers and written orders from command. But here he was. "Your Royal Highness?" James said quietly, his voice steady, despite the chaos erupting around them. Behind him, footsteps, fast, urgent. Security officers rushing forward. Other guards breaking formation. The entire system responding to the violation like white blood cells attacking a virus. "Step back immediately." A voice shouted. Commander Wallace, the head of the guard, a man who had served the crown for out of years without a single incident. James didn't step back. He looked directly into Princess Anne's eyes. Something you're never supposed to do? Another rule broken? I need you to breathe with me, he said softly. In through your nose, slow. Count to 4. Her eyes widened. She understood now. He had seen it. The panic attack. The invisible enemy that had been creeping up on her all evening. Strong hands grabbed James's shoulders. 2 officers. Pulling him backward. His moment was ending. Whatever he came to do, he had seconds left to do it. That's when he leaned in and whispered the words. 7 words. That's all it was. 7 simple words that made tears spring instantly to Princess Anne's eyes. Your mother would be proud of you. The officers yanked him back hard. His boots scraped against the marble. The commander stepped between them, his face red with fury. What in God's name do you think you're doing, McAllister? Wallace's voice boomed through the hall, but James wasn't looking at the commander. He was still looking at the princess, and she was looking back. Tears rolled down her cheeks now. Not from fear. Not from the panic attack that had been gripping her chest like a vice. From something else. Something deeper. Her mother, the late queen, gone for 2 years now. The woman who had taught him everything about duty, about service, about carrying impossible weight with grace and dignity. The same woman whose final words to her daughter had been, "Never forget who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." And here on this terrible night, when Anne had been ready to walk out in front of those cameras and apologize for things she hadn't done, to bow to pressure and lies just to make the noise stop, here was a stranger, a guard, a man who had risked everything to remind her. "Take him to the holding room," Commander Wallace ordered. Immediately, the officers began dragging James toward the exit. He didn't resist. He had done what he came to do. Whatever happened next didn't matter. But then Princess Anne spoke. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone froze. Because when a royal gives an order, you obey. Protocol or no protocol. She wiped her eyes, straightened her back. The panic attack was fading now, pushed back by something stronger. By memory, by pride, by the ghost of a queen who had ruled with both strength and compassion. "Release him," Anne said. Commander Wallace turned slowly. "Your Highness, with respect, this man has violated—" "I said release him." Her voice was firmer now. The voice of someone who had found something she had lost. The officers let go of James's arms. He stood there, tall and still, waiting for what would come next. Princess Anne took a step forward, then another, until she was standing right in front of him, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. James hesitated, then spoke the truth. "My sister, Your Highness. She used to get them. The panic attacks. After our father died, I learned to recognize the signs." Anne nodded slowly. Understanding passed between them. To people who had lost someone, 2 people who carried grief like stones in their pockets. "What happened to your sister?" And asked, "She's better now, stronger. She learned that running from the pain only makes it worse. That sometimes you have to stand in it. Face it. Let people see it." Princess closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, something had changed. A decision had been made. She turned to Commander Wallace. "Cancel the press conference." The commander blinked. "Your Highness, you heard me. Cancel it. I won't be making a statement tonight, but the media. The pressure from Parliament. They're expecting they can expect all they want." Princess Anne's voice was steel now. "I will not apologize for things I haven't done. I will not bow to lies. My mother didn't raise me to run from fights. She raised me to stand in the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. A smile. Small. Sad, but real. She raised me to be proud of who I am." And in that moment, James McAllister understood something. He hadn't just stopped a panic attack. He hadn't just broken protocol. He had reminded a princess that she was also a warrior. Asterisk. Asterisk, the holding room was small, cold gray walls. 1 metal chair. 1 light bulb hanging from the ceiling. James sat alone. His uniform felt heavy. His mind raced. What had he done? The door opened. Commander Wallace stepped inside. His face was unreadable now. The anger had settled into something else, something harder to identify. He closed the door behind him. Didn't sit. Just stood there, arms crossed, studying James like a puzzle he couldn't solve. 20 years, Wallace said finally. That's how long I've commanded the Queen's Guard. 20 years without a single incident. Without a single break-in protocol. James said nothing. What could he say? He had broken protocol. That was a fact. Do you know what happens to guards who step out of line? Wallace continued. They're dismissed dishonorably. They lose everything. Their position. Their pension. Their reputation. I understand, sir. Do you? Wallace leaned forward. Do you really understand what you've thrown away? You could have had a career, respect, a future, and you tossed it all aside for, what, a moment of heroism? James met his eyes. She was suffering, sir. She's royalty. They suffer in private, not in front of guards, not in front of staff. That's how it works. With respect, sir, I disagree. You disagree? Yes, sir. She's royalty, but she's also human. And humans need help sometimes. Protocol or not. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Wallace stared at James. James stared back. Neither man blinked. Then something unexpected happened. Wallace smiled. Just a little. A crack in the stone face. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. A young guard I knew many years ago. Stubborn, idealistic. Thought he could change the world one good deed at a time. What happened to him? He became me. The smile faded, and somewhere along the way, he forgot why he joined the guard in the first place. It wasn't for the ceremony. It wasn't for the prestige. It was to protect people. To serve. To do what's right, even when it's hard. Wallace moved to the door, his hand on the handle. Then he paused. You're dismissed, McAllister. James's heart sank. So this was it. The end. Dismissed from this room, Wallace continued. Return to your quarters. Get some rest. You're back on duty tomorrow morning? 6 a.m. Sharp. James blinked. Sir, Princess Anne has requested that you remain on the guard, specifically assigned to her detail. She said, and I quote, I want people around me who see me as a person first and a title second. I don't understand. Wallace opened the door. Neither do I, McAllister. But I stopped trying to understand royalty a long time ago. I just follow orders. And my orders are to keep you on active duty. He paused. Don't make me regret this, sir. I won't. Wallace left. The door clicked shut. James sat in the silence, trying to process what had just happened. He still had his position. His career, his future, but more than that, he had made a difference. Upstairs, in her private chambers, Princess Anne sat at her desk, the curtains drawn, the lights dim. A letter lay in front of her, handwritten, old, the paper yellowed with age. Her mother's handwriting. She had found it months ago, hidden in a box of old photographs. A letter written years before the Queen's death. A letter meant for Anne to find at exactly the right moment, or maybe the wrong one. The words were simple, direct, like her mother had always been. My dearest Anne, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I imagine you're facing something difficult. Something that makes you want to run, to hide, to be anyone other than who you are. Don't. The world will always try to make you smaller. To quiet your voice. To dim your light. Let them try, but never let them succeed. You are my daughter. You are strong. You are worthy. And you are loved. Always, Mom. Anne's fingers traced the words. Tears fell onto the paper, but she didn't wipe them away. James's words had unlocked something. A door she had sealed shut after her mother's death. The door to grief. To vulnerability. To the raw, messy truth that royalty isn't armor. It's just a title. And underneath it, she was still just a daughter who missed her mother. A knock at the door. "Come in," Anne said, quickly composing herself. Her private secretary entered. Margaret, a woman who had served the royal family for 3 decades. Gray hair, kind eyes, hands that never stopped moving. "The media's going wild, Your Highness," Margaret said gently. "Rumors are spreading. They're saying you canceled the press conference because you have something to hide. Let them say it." Margaret blinked. "I'm sorry?" Anne stood, walked to the window, looked out at the lights of London spreading like stars across the darkness. "I spent my whole life trying to control the narrative, Margaret, trying to make sure people saw what I wanted them to see. Perfect, proper, unshakable." She turned back. "But you know what? I'm tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of apologizing for existing. Tired of living up to an image that was never really me." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, tomorrow morning, I'm going to give a different kind of press conference. Not an apology. Not a defense. Just the truth." Margaret's eyes widened. "The truth about what?" Anne smiled. "Everything." And for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. Asterisk morning came cold and gray. The kind of London morning where fog hangs thick and the sun struggles to break through. James stood at his post outside Princess Anne's office. Same uniform, same rifle, same position. But everything felt different now. Other guards gave him looks, some curious, some jealous, some outright hostile. He had broken the most sacred rule and somehow survived. That made him either very lucky or very dangerous. He wasn't sure which. Inside the office, Princess Anne sat across from her legal team. 3 men in expensive suits, tired eyes, worried faces. "Your Highness, we strongly advise against this," the lead attorney said. His name was Richard Pemberton. 60 years old, silver hair. "A man who had protected royal secrets for decades," noted Anne replied calmly. "If you go public with the truth about the financial discrepancies, the media will crucify you, even though you had nothing to do with it. Even though it was entirely your former advisor's doing. Let them." Pemberton leaned forward. "This isn't just about you. This affects the entire royal family. The monarchy itself. Trust in the institution is already fragile. If you admit there was corruption, even corruption you weren't responsible for, Richard?" Anne's voice was firm but not unkind. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm done protecting institutions at the expense of truth. My former advisor stole money. He used my name to do it. And when it came to light, everyone assumed I knew, that I was complicit. That I'm just another corrupt royal living off taxpayer money. Which is why we've been working to clear your name quietly, through legal channels, through shadows and backroom deals and carefully worded statements that make me look guilty even when I'm not." And stood. "No more. I'm going to stand in front of those cameras and tell people exactly what happened. That I trusted the wrong person. That I was betrayed. That I'm human and I made mistakes." The attorney's face paled. "Your Highness, I'm not asking for permission, Richard. I'm informing you of my decision." Silence fell over the room. The other lawyers exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. Royals didn't do this. They didn't confess. They didn't show weakness. But Anne wasn't like other royals. She never had been. Outside. James heard the conversation through the door. Not intentionally. The walls were old. The wood was thin. Sound traveled. He thought about his own moment of truth. Yesterday. When he stepped forward. When he broke protocol. When he chose humanity over rules, it had cost him nothing. And everything. And now the princess was about to do the same. The press conference was scheduled for noon. The palace grounds filled with reporters, cameras, microphones, eager faces hungry for scandal. They expected an apology, a denial, maybe even a resignation. They had no idea what was coming. James stood in formation with the other guards. 20 men, silent, still. watching as Princess Anne emerged from the palace. She wore a simple blue dress. No jewelry except her mother's pearls. Hair pulled back. Face clean. No armor. No mask. Just herself. She stepped up to the podium. The cameras flashed like lightning. Questions shouted from every direction. She raised her hand. Silence fell. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady, clear. "I'm here to talk to you about trust, about betrayal, and about taking responsibility." The reporters leaned in. This wasn't the script they expected. 3 years ago, I hired a financial advisor named Thomas Whitmore. He came highly recommended. Prestigious background. Excellent credentials. I trusted him to manage certain aspects of the royal estate's charitable foundations. Anne paused, breathed, continued. That trust was misplaced. Over the course of 18 months, Mr. Whitmore embezzled nearly £2 million. He used my name, my position, my signature on documents I never properly reviewed, and when it was discovered, he disappeared. Left me to face the consequences. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stand here today not to make excuses, not to blame others, but to take responsibility for my part in this. I should have been more careful, more diligent, more involved in the details. I wasn't, because of that money meant for children's hospitals and veterans programs was stolen. A reporter raised her hand. "Your Highness, are you saying you're guilty?" Anne looked directly at her. "I'm saying I'm accountable. Guilty of neglect? Yes. Guilty of trusting the wrong person? Absolutely. Guilty of theft or fraud? No, but that doesn't absolve me from the responsibility of making this right." Another reporter. "How will you make it right?" "I've personally repaid every penny that was stolen, £2 million from my own inheritance. Additionally, I'm establishing new oversight protocols for all royal charitable foundations. Independent auditors. Monthly public reports. Complete transparency." The crowd erupted. Questions flying. Cameras flashing. History being made, because royals didn't do this. They didn't admit mistakes. Didn't show vulnerability. Didn't treat the public like equals who deserved the truth. But Anne did. She stood there for 45 minutes, answering every question, hiding nothing. When someone asked if she felt humiliated, she said yes. When someone asked if she cried about it, she said yes. When someone asked if she considered resigning, she paused, then smiled. "Every single day," she admitted. "But my mother taught me something. She said running from hard things doesn't make them easier. It just makes you weaker. So no, I won't resign. I'll stay. I'll do the work. I'll earn back trust the only way it can be earned. Through action, through time, through truth." As she finished, something unexpected happened. Applause. It started with one reporter, then another, then the whole crowd, clapping for honesty, for courage, for a princess who chose truth over image. James felt something in his chest. Pride. Not for himself. For her, she had done it. Broken protocol. Shattered expectations. Changed the game. Just like he had. And as Princess Anne walked back toward the palace, she glanced at James. Just for a moment. A small nod. A silent thank you. Because without his 7 words last night, she might never have found the strength for this moment. Without his reminder of who her mother was, she might never have remembered who she could be. Asterisk, the days that followed were chaos. The media exploded. Headlines everywhere. Some praised Princess Anne's honesty, called her brave, revolutionary, a new kind of royal for a new era. Others tore her apart, called her weak, foolish, said she had damaged the monarchy beyond repair. The palace became a fortress. Extra security, locked gates, staff on high alert, and through it all, James stood at his post, silent, watching, waiting for the dust to settle. But the dust doesn't settle quickly when you've started a revolution. 1 week after the press conference, James received a summons, not from Commander Wallace. From Princess Anne herself, He arrived at her private sitting room at precisely 3 in the afternoon. Knocked twice. Waited. "Come in," her voice called. He entered. The room was smaller than he expected. Books everywhere. Photographs on the walls. A fireplace crackling softly. It felt more like a library than a royal chamber. Anne sat in a chair by the window. She looked tired. Older somehow. But her eyes were clear. Strong. "Sit, please," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. James hesitated. "Guards don't sit with royalty." "That's an order, not a request," Anne said with a slight smile. He sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped. Rain began to fall outside. Gentle. Steady. "You know why I asked you here?" Anne finally said. "No, Your Highness. I wanted to thank you properly. Without cameras, without protocol, just person to person." James shifted uncomfortably. "I was just doing my duty, ma'am." "No," Anne's voice was firm. "You were doing something much harder than duty. You were being human. In a world that tries very hard to make us into symbols and statues, you remembered that we're all just people underneath." Walked to a small table. Picked up an envelope. "After the press conference, I received thousands of letters, emails, messages. Most were kind. Some were cruel. But one." She handed him the envelope. "One was from your sister." James's eyes widened. "Emma, she told me about your father. About how he died when you were both young. About the panic attacks she suffered for years afterward. And about how you were the only one who truly saw her. Who helped her. Who refused to let her disappear into the darkness." James's throat tightened. He hadn't spoken to Emma about what happened at the palace. How had she known? As if reading his mind, Anne continued. "She saw the news coverage. Apparently several reporters figured out who you were. Who the guard was that broke protocol. Your name got out. And when she saw it, she wrote to me immediately." Anne sat back down. "She wanted me to know that what you did for me wasn't unusual. It's who you are. A person who sees others. Who steps forward when everyone else steps back." James looked down at the envelope. His sister's handwriting on the front, messy, familiar. "She's very proud of you," Anne said softly. "As am I. I don't deserve, stop." Anne's command was gentle, but absolute. "Don't diminish what you did. You saved me that night. Not from physical harm, but from something worse. You saved me from losing myself, from becoming so buried under protocol and pressure and pain that I forgot who I was." Tears formed in James's eyes. He blinked them back. "Guards don't cry," but Anne saw them anyway. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can be human here. In this room. With me. No protocol. No rules. Just truth." And so James let the tears fall. For his father. For his sister. For all the times he had stood perfectly still, while the world fell apart around him. For all the times he wanted to step forward but didn't, until that one night when he finally did. They sat in silence for a while. Two people who had carried impossible weight. Who had learned that sometimes breaking is necessary before you can truly be whole. "I have a favor to ask," Anne said eventually. "Anything, Your Highness?" "Establishing a new program. A mental health initiative for palace staff and guards. Too many people who work here suffer in silence. Depression, anxiety, PTSD. They're afraid to speak up because they think it makes them weak. That it means they can't do their job." James nodded slowly. "That's a good idea. I want you to help me run it." "Ma'am?" "You understand this in a way I never could. You've lived it. With your sister. With yourself, I imagine. You know what it's like to hold everything inside until you can't breathe. I'm just a guard. I'm not qualified. You're qualified because you care. Because you see people. Because when it mattered most, you chose compassion over protocol." Anne leaned forward. "I can hire therapists, counselors, experts, but I need someone who can bridge the gap between them and the staff. Someone the guards and workers will trust. Someone who understands both worlds." James thought about it. really thought about it. This wasn't just standing at a post. This was stepping into something bigger, scarier, more meaningful. Why me? He asked quietly. Anne smiled. Because 7 words from you changed my life. Imagine what you could do with more than 7 words. He looked at her. This woman who had lost her mother, who had been betrayed and lied about and forced to stand in front of the world and confess her mistakes. This woman who chose truth when lies would have been easier. This woman who was now choosing to help others because someone had helped her. Okay, James said. I'll do it. Anne's smile widened. Thank you. She stood, extended her hand. James stood as well. Took it. A handshake between equals, between 2 people who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're not okay, and then ask for help, or offer it. As James left the room, he felt something shift inside him. A door opening. A path revealing itself. He had joined the guard to serve, to protect, to stand still in the face of chaos, but maybe true. Service wasn't about standing still. Maybe it was about knowing exactly when to move. Asterisk. 6 months later, the palace gardens were in full bloom. Spring had arrived in London with an explosion of color. Tulips, roses, daffodils, life returning after a long, cold winter. James walked the path slowly. Not in uniform today. Just civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket. He looked different without the red coat and bearskin hat. He's younger, more relaxed. He carried a folder under his arm, reports, statistics. The mental health program had launched 3 months ago. Started small. Just a few counselors. A quiet room where palace staff could talk. No judgment. No consequences. Just help words spread quickly. First, it was the housekeeping staff. Women who had worked at the palace for decades, who had seen things, heard things, carried secrets that weighed like stones. Then the cooks, the groundskeepers, the administrative staff, and finally, the guards. James's brothers in uniform. Men who had been trained to never show weakness, never admit pain, never ask for help. They came to him in the evenings. After their shifts, some crying, some angry, some just empty. And James listened. He didn't have all the answers. Didn't pretend to. But he had something more valuable. Understanding. Empathy. The knowledge that comes from having stood in the same darkness. The program had helped 47 people so far. 47 lives touched, changed, saved in some cases. One guard had been planning to end his life. The weight of PTSD from combat tours had become too much. He came to James on a Tuesday evening, broke down completely. Admitted everything. James stayed with him all night, talking, listening, making sure he wasn't alone. That guard was still alive, still serving, still fighting his battles, but not alone anymore. James reached the rose garden. Princess Anne was already there. She came here often now. It had been her mother's favorite spot. She looked up as he approached, smiled. How are the numbers? She asked. James handed her the folder. Growing every week. We're going to need more counselors. Maybe a dedicated space? The quiet room isn't big enough anymore. Anne flipped through the pages, her expression serious, focused. This wasn't just a pet project for her. It was personal. A mission. Whatever you need, she said. Budget isn't an issue. Saving lives is... They walked together, side by side, not princess and guard, just to people who had found purpose in pain. I got another letter from your sister, Anne said casually. James smiled. She'll write to you more than she writes to me now. She's asking if you'll come speak at her university. About mental health. About breaking stigma. I'm not a speaker. You're a storyteller. There's a difference. Anne stopped walking. Turned to face him. You changed my life with 7 words, James. Imagine what you could do with an entire speech. He thought about it. Standing in front of hundreds of strangers, sharing his story, his father's death, his sister's struggles, his own fears and doubts. It terrified him, which probably meant he should do it. "I'll think about it," he said. Anne nodded, satisfied. She had learned to push without forcing, to encourage without demanding. They continued walking, the sun warm on their faces, birds singing, peace settling over the garden like a blanket. "Can I ask you something?" James said. "Always. That night, when I whispered those words to you about your mother, how did you know I was right? How did you know she would be proud?" Anne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, distant, remembering. "'Cause the last conversation I had with her before she died was about legacy. She said she didn't care if people remembered her as a great queen. She cared if they remembered her as a good person, someone who tried to do right even when it was hard." Anne's eyes glistened. "And she told me that the measure of a life isn't in how many times you stand tall. It's in how many times you get back up after falling." She looked at James. I had fallen. That night, I was ready to stay down, to apologize for existing, to make myself smaller so everyone else could feel comfortable. But you didn't. No, because you reminded me who I was, whose daughter I am, what I'm made of." James felt emotion rise in his chest. "I just said what felt right. That's all any of us can do." Anne smiled. "Say what feels right. Do what feels right. Even when it breaks every rule, even when it costs us everything." They reached a bench, sat down together. The palace loomed behind them, massive, ancient, full of history and protocol and tradition. But here, in this garden, none of that mattered. Here, they were just two people who had survived something hard, who had chosen truth over comfort, who had learned that sometimes breaking protocol is the most noble thing you can do. "Thank you," Anne said suddenly. "For what? For being brave enough to step forward? For seeing me as a person, not a title? For reminding me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the most courageous thing we can offer the world." James nodded. "Thank you for letting me. For not having me thrown in prison." Anne laughed. A real laugh. Full and genuine. "I considered it. Briefly." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the world move around them. Gardeners tending flowers. Staff walking past. Life continuing its endless forward march. "I miss her," Anne said quietly. "My mother. Every single day." "I miss my father," James replied. "And I never even really knew him." Love doesn't need time to be real. It just needs truth. The words hung in the air. Simple. Profound. True. James thought about his father. A man who died when James was only 6. A man who lived on only in photographs and stories, and the occasional memory that felt more like a dream. But the love was real. The loss was real. The impact was real. Just like the 7 words he had spoken to Princess Anne. Were real, your mother would be proud of you. 7 words that had changed to lives. Maybe more. Because Anne's honesty at that press conference had inspired others. Letters poured in from people all over the world. People who had been hiding their own mistakes, their own pain, their own humanity. And they found courage in hers. Found permission to be imperfect. To admit fault. To stand in truth even when it hurt. One moment of broken protocol had created ripples that spread far beyond the palace walls. Had reminded the world that behind every title, every uniform, every mask of perfection, there's just a person trying their best, failing sometimes. Getting up anyway, do you ever regret it? Anne asked. Breaking protocol? Risking everything? James thought about it. Really thought about it, then smiled. Not even for a second. Anne smiled back. Good. Neither do I. And in that moment, sitting in the garden with spring blooming around them, they both understood something profound. That the rules we break in the name of love, compassion, and truth aren't really broken at all. They're just transformed into something better. Something real. Something worth fighting for. The sun began to set, golden light spilling across the garden. painting everything in warm, hopeful colors. James and Anne stood, said their goodbyes, went their separate ways, but they carried the same truth with them, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is be human, even when the world expects you to be perfect, especially then.